or use the chat. So there you hopefully heard recording in progress, and we're going to spend about 45 minutes together. So hopefully that's ample time for everyone to get their voice heard, and we'll be capturing all your input and comments onto this mural board. So that's kind of the layout of the next 45 minutes together. I do ask that if you have questions, you can put them in the chat. Again, the focus of this is to get input. We do have some experts with us in the room if there's any major questions, but we're really going to try to get your input on these 3 questions on the screen today. And I'll be facilitating and queuing people up. So if you'd like to verbally respond to any of those questions, please hit that raise hand button. It's at the bottom of your screen on the right-hand side with a little smiley face. You can click on that and then raise your hand, and I'll call on folks as they come up. If you are on your phone, you can dial *9, and that's also raises your hand. But if you're struggling to find all of those things, you can also put your name in the chat, and I'll put you in the queue. So I see one hand, and again, I'll just point you all to the 3 questions you see on the screen and that Thomas shared earlier. Under what circumstances, if any, should e-bikes be allowed on non-motorized trails and closed roads on lands managed by DNR and WDFW? Which of the 3 classes may be allowable, if any or all? And if anyone needs a refresher on those classes, let me know. And then what opportunities, challenges, or concerns should be considered regarding e-bike use? So got a couple people in the queue. James, I'll start with you and then head to Dylan.
Right, so I ride electric mountain bikes, mountain bikes, basically, mostly in the Capitol Forest area in Olympia. I think that e-bikes should be allowed everywhere. I think it's more of a speed limit problem. Some people don't want others to go by them super fast. So whether someone has a throttle or is pedaling, to me, isn't a big deal. It's really about how fast. How fast is this trail rated for?
Thanks, James. And maybe I'll follow up quickly on that with talking about speed. It kind of brings me to thinking about trail etiquette. And so for you or others to think about too, of what primary sources of information about trails, rules and regulations, or other outdoor recreation guidance, how to keep that in people's awareness. But you can type a response in the chat, James, but I will go to Dylan next, and then I've got Scott, and then Jenny afterwards. Jenny Hennessy.
Hey, good afternoon. Thank you. I will respectfully disagree with the gentleman who spoke before me, and I'm of the opinion that e-bikes should not be allowed on non-motorized trails, possibly with the exception of folks who have handicap placards or are above a certain age threshold. I'm also a mountain biker, hiker, and I find that really, really often the folks who are on e-bikes are moving much more close to a motorcycle speed. An average human produces maybe 100 watts of power, and your e-bikes are producing 750 watts of power. And as battery technology and everything else improves, they're only going to get more speed, lighter, faster.
Dylan, sorry to interrupt. We're beginning to lose you a little bit with the disconnection. Okay. I'm hearing most of it, but just maybe if you could write your comment in the chat. We put some of it on the journal.
Okay, got it.
Thank you. Okay, Scott, I have you up next, then Jenny Hennessy, and then Daniel Grillo. And Scott, you are on mute currently.
There we go.
There you go.
Can you, yes, thank you. I've been mountain biking for 34, 35 years. I love climbing as much as I love downhill riding. Unfortunately, a few years ago, I actually have an ADA placard now because I came down with a neurological movement disorder. And so I switched to an e-bike because I thought my mountain biking days were over unless I drove to the top, you know, shuttled. And I don't see the problem with class 1 bikes at all. They are governed. You can go uphill a little faster, downhill, they're actually slower. You know, I've been doing Strava since it came out, and all my times are slower downhill on my e-bike because I can only get up so much assisted speed. Whereas with my other Trek Remedy, I could hit a run doing 30 miles an hour. Whereas with my e-bike, I'm lucky to get 20, 21. This whole argument kind of reminds me of snowboards when they first came out. You know, the old skiers were like, oh no, we don't want these young punks. Not that I'm a young punk, I'm 61. But I think it just comes down to common trail sense and courtesy. We don't tear up the trail anymore than any other bikes. And even though I now have an ADA placard, I think I should be able to ride on the trails with my friends that don't ride e-bikes instead of having to go to the motorcycle trails, which are more dangerous for me and for the motorcycles. They actually go uphill faster than they do downhill, and bikes are the opposite. You know, regular bikes are the opposite. So I think it just comes down to people don't like this new technology. They're stuck in the past, and it's the future. And I think we just need to come up with rules and regulations to make it safe for everybody and allow people to get out and have fun, because that's why we all mountain bike, because it's fun.
Thank you for those thoughts, Scott. Jenny, I have you next, then Daniel, and then Tibby. Hopefully I pronounced that right.
Okay, great. Sorry, I was on mute.
Okay.
So I also have been riding mountain bikes for 20 years. I'm from Idaho. I'm relatively new to Washington. I've only been here 10 years. But as others have mentioned, there's always going to be trail conflict on no matter what you do, motorcycles, mountain bikes, skiing, motorcycles, whatever. So we all have to figure out how to work together because there's only so many trails. I think the biggest thing for me is I do love the ability, and I love the fact that e-bikes are becoming popular, and that is allowing people that were not previously allowed to bike but love it an opportunity to do so. I think the biggest things for me, and I think a couple other people mentioned this, is the speed in which people are traveling on the trails is very concerning to me. I've been almost hit a couple of times by people coming up too fast on me or coming around corners that I didn't expect. And so I'm actually worried a little bit about my safety. And then the other thing is concerns over like trail maintenance and taking care of our trails. I have seen a couple of different types of e-bikes, and I don't know the actual different classifications, but for me, it's clear like they get stuck in something and the wheels are just spinning and you can see the dirt flying, which makes me like really nervous because of what that's doing to our trails and the maintenance that's going to be required. And then there was one other one I can't remember. I think that was it. But I'm for e-bikes. I just think we need to figure out how we all work together to make sure that everyone is safe and their trails are taken care of. I have one more. I remember what it is. I'm sorry.
That's okay. We've got the time.
The one thing that is, I think, is like confusing to people is the different classifications and the throttle versus not throttle and the what's considered a motorcycle and what's not. I think when people see e-bikes, like I've seen different bikes on trails around the Seattle area, so I'm like, that looks like a motorcycle, and it has like it is electric in some way, but it literally looks like a motorcycle. But people are taking the interpretation of e-bike and saying, well, it doesn't have a motor, so it's okay. So I think there has to be really clear distinction in a simple way, because people don't intuitively know like the different classifications of bikes of what is allowed and what is not allowed as an e-bike. Thank you.
Thanks so much. And also know I see some folks typing in the chat. So for those of you typing in the chat, thank you. And just know that we're also capturing your comments. So those will be captured as well after this meeting. So next I've got Daniel, then Tibby, and then Ken. So Daniel, go for it.
Hello, thank you. I think the overarching theme of my feedback is that the community needs to be able to regulate. So you'll see that theme come through in answers to all three of these questions for me. Because as much as we appreciate the leadership and guidance from our land manager partners, we also understand the enforcement and challenges of showing up trailheads and talking and telling users about changes in regulations. So I think community enforcement and clarity is really important. Under what circumstances should they be allowed? I think that if the decision is made that e-bikes should be allowed, that it would be appropriate only on one-way biking specific trails, where the flow of traffic is moving in one direction and the users that are on that trail are expecting to see folks moving at the rate of speed of a bicycle. I also think that circumstances that should be a part of that would be to this, whatever the qualifications may be. Currently it's ADA placards. And if we're going to continue with some other kind of qualification, that qualification needs to travel with the rider on the trail, similar to the way that land manager partners at Campbell Global are managing the influx of gravel riders in their area, or Palmer Coking Coal managing riders in the west side of the trails at Black Diamond Open Space. So it's not unheard of to be asked to carry a license. And I think in this case, because they're actually on a different type of vehicle, so to speak, that it would need to come with them as opposed to be at their vehicle at the trailhead. That's also assuming that they're taking a vehicle to the trailhead, because we're also graced with a lot of pedalable access trails here in the Northwest. Which of the three classes? I really like the comments of the last speaker. I don't think that agencies, other trail users, nor consumers are really differentiating between the classes of e-bikes so much as legislators and manufacturers. And I think that if we did a blind test, I think the majority of us, even regular trail users, would struggle to differentiate. If it's got an electric motor, if it has two wheels, we can assume that if the general message is that those are allowed on the trails, then we will see all varieties. And in the explosion of e-bike popularity in the last few months and years, that is what we have seen on the trails, is all varieties from e-moto to class 3, class 2, class 1 e-bikes. What opportunities, challenges, concerns? I think one of the big ones that I haven't heard a lot talked about is search and rescue. I think that access is a true gift, and we do need to, having worked with some search and rescue organizations in preparing them to extricate someone from an adventure out in the woods, we do need to consider the weight of the bike that we would need to be rescuing along with the person, the ability of an unimpeded person that is out there in the wilderness, and also just the readiness of the users and the community to recognize the potential risks that they're putting themselves into. Another opportunity, challenge, or concern would be the enforcement. Again, we know this is a challenge now in terms of access, speed limits, et cetera, one-way demarcations, et cetera. And I think we'd be opening up a new set of challenges. Trail design. We've got some amazing trail design oversight here in Washington, a partnership between organizations like Evergreen and land managers. And it helps to be able to take the full user group into account when designing those trails for sustainability. The advocacy work. We need to consider whether the mountain bike community is ready to be considered along with moto users when we're talking about access. We'd have to talk about public relations. So trailhead signage kind of gets a lot of the attention because we think that signs can solve everything, but I think regular users know that signs don't solve everything. So that would be trailhead signage, it would be community signage, it would be on-trail signage, it would be nonprofit asking for really ambassadorship in the nonprofit community to step out in front. And if partners aren't ready to do that, then I think we need to question whether we're ready to spread a message. And then the last thing is similar concerns to other motorized trail dangers. The reason that the paved cycling community is very careful and intentional with e-bike access to long fought bike legislation, such as separated bike lanes, are because a lot of the concerns about motorized users come back into play when you're introducing a mixture of motorized users and non-motorized users into the same play space. And so we just have to start considering motorized trail user considerations overall.
Well, thank you for all that detailed and thoughtful feedback. We appreciate it. I'll go through my list. Tibi Botokan, you're next. Then we've got Ken Ringer, then Maureen Hoffman, then Mark Smith, then Andrew Stevens, and Scott. I'm not sure if you re-raised your hand, but I see hand is raised, and I'll just encourage other folks. We've got about 30 minutes left in this breakout room. So if you'd like to raise your hand, please do. But Tibi, please go for it.
Hello, thank you for giving us this opportunity to express how we feel about this. I've been owning an electric bike for 2 years now, and I strongly get the feeling that the people I hear talking about electric bikes, they probably never rode one. And it just feels that way. You know, they're describing an e-bike as this monstrous piece of equipment that it is different than a regular bike or a mountain bike, and is going to get on the you know, roads and trails, and is going to be a disaster with safety concerns, and is going to tear the trails apart and all that. That is far from the truth. It is a regular bike that has got a battery and has got a motor that people with limited physical conditions that could be either due to an illness or age, people who do not qualify for an ADA permit, to be able to get out of the house and enjoy nature, enjoy places where they can find some quiet, where is quiet enough where you can see birds chirping and all that, far away from the traffic and everything else. They're very safe. I like to hike. I've been myself on trails many times, and regular mountain bikes, you know, yes, they flew by me many times. I felt a couple of times at least in danger of a regular mountain bike. It all comes down to people being respectful, people obeying to rules. In my opinion, I think class 1 and class 2 e-bikes should be allowed everywhere. And that's because of the speed limit of 20 miles per hour. It is rarely when you get to 20 miles an hour. I mean, you might get that on a regular road where there is a traffic of cars. You might get to that speed, but you never get that on a mountain road or on a trail or anything like that. I would never do it because, I mean, it would not feel safe for me. If my bike would not have a battery and the motor, and would be like a regular mountain bike, I can achieve 20 miles an hour if I want to, going downhill, you know? So it wouldn't, there is no difference between an e-bike and the regular bike, I would say. Some of those e-bikes, they have, just like mountain bikes, some of them, they have fat tires. And I think, you know, they protect the trail because the tracks they're making, they're much wider than a regular tire. Which I think it's a benefit. So yes, class 1 and class 2, I think they should be allowed everywhere. I think the limitations that would be appropriate would be speed limitations. It ultimately would come down to people being respectful. I don't think it's going to be, you know, a forest agent with a radar detector up on the trails in the mountains to check out people's speeds. So it will come down to people being respectful towards each other and obeying those particular rules. I believe that signs work, you know, so having signs posted at the trailheads, that would be helpful. And I do encourage people who talk about, you know, e-bikes and they have an opinion about it, to to go ahead and ask a friend who has one, you know, to let them ride it and see how it is, see how it feels, see how safe it is to ride an electric bike. And while you're riding it, think about the people around you to see how you feel about them. If you think you are a hazard, you know, to the people around you. And I feel confident that most of those people, they would change their opinions about e-bike, and they would be in favor of it. But there are a lot of people, especially after COVID, that, you know, they have some kind of long-lasting effects from the COVID, where their physical abilities, they're not like they used to be. And it's hard to go uphill riding a regular bike. And if I can't do it, that means I'm not getting out of the house. An e-bike would allow someone with those inabilities to enjoy life and feel like they're still alive. And again, that could be because of an illness, physical impairments or inabilities, or age as well. And just being old, you don't get an ADA permit.
Thank you so much. I don't mean to interrupt. We've just got folks in the queue and limited time. So really appreciate those thoughts. If you weren't able to wrap them up, please put them in the chat. But I will go to Ken Ringer next, then Maureen, then Mark Smith, then Andrew, and Kyle, I see you've also joined the queue. So Ken Ringer, to you. Ken, we can't hear you yet if you are speaking. Okay, I'll come back to you. I'll go next to Maureen Hoffman.
Hi, everybody. I am a class 2 e-bike rider, and I got the bike about 4 years ago because of my knee. I can't ride a regular bike with my knee, but with the e-bike, it allows me to. So it really has increased the access. I read the classifications of the 3 bikes, and I think we dramatically need to revise those so they're simplified and people have a better understanding. This is probably codified in state law somewhere, but essentially, class 1 is pedal assist capped at 20 miles an hour. Class 2 is pedal assist capped at 20 miles an hour with a throttle. Class 3 is pedal assist capped at 28 miles an hour, no throttle. Just simplify it so people have an understanding of that. I do wonder about, these days I'm on my bike or I take walks in my neighborhood. I have not been out on the trails in the parks or fish and wildlife properties for quite a long time. But if I'm going to go out on a trail, even as an e-bike rider, I think, well, I don't want someone coming by me quickly. And this really comes down to safety and courtesy. And that's whether you're on the trails, you know, the dirt trails in the mountains or on the city bike lanes and such. So I don't know how we solve that. I do think that we need to separate the question of e-bike use on either the natural surface trails versus the closed roads. I think closed roads, have at it. I think there should not be any constraints on that, on the closed roads. You know, make use of those. On the natural surface trails, perhaps class 1 and class 2. I'm not a mountain biker, so I can't relate to that access of it. I don't have background in that. That's about all I needed to say.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, Mark Smith, then Andrew Stevens, then Kyle, and then back to Scott. And that's
Thank
Kyle
you.
Farley. Yes.
Thank you. Yes, I was one of the citizens who did support 5452 and helped with Senator Cleveland and the others to bring this about in all disclosure. I'm over 60. I'm not gonna tell you how old, but I'm an outdoor enthusiast. I've ridden horses. But you can do it. I've done it, but my age doesn't allow me to continue to do that. I found that the e-bike technologies under the 3 classifications with the 750 watt 1 horsepower limit, because that's what it is, provides me the ability to extend my adventures and allow me to go outside and allow me to enjoy the areas that I grew up loving and enjoying. I do understand the natural surface trails to the non-motorized roads. And as Maureen pointed out, that argument is something where they should be looked at per trail. Are the trails safe enough to be able to ride in that? And I don't think any e-biker is really overly concerned to be able to ride on every trail in the state in that. But when you have closed non-motorized roads that were former logging roads that had 100,000-pound log trucks going down them, and we're not allowed to ride an e-bike on them because they're worried about damages or that, that's really a problem. I also think that the benefit is the health benefits. Everyone says you're cheating. I get a really good workout and an even workout, and it's really comfortable to be able to get outdoors. And I think I'm in better shape than I have been. Which of the 3 classes should be used? I think that e-bikes are a smart technology. You're not going to be able to really tell the difference easily. It's more the etiquettes of the trail and the road that we have to look at. And I think that we really need to look at allowing people to use them as long as they're in those class 1, 2, and 3s and not regulate that problem. The throttle situation, that's more for like an assist if you're a little older, you're in trouble, or your safety feature. And that throttle, you can't use all the time on these class bikes, because if you do, you're not going to get back. Those throttles eat up battery, and battery life goes away, and batteries are the assisted fuel. What opportunities and challenges there are? We have great opportunities. We have hundreds of thousands of miles of road, logging road, all through this state. And to shut off these old logging roads, to not allow people to spread out and not be on so many trails like we're forcing people, this would extend the amount of existing trails that we'd have for opportunities for outdoor recreation. I think that's something we need to look at. And the other thing is, we can't classify an e-bike with a mountain bike. A mountain bike is a sport. People ride up a hill and then try to come down as fast as they can with their adrenaline. So they use an e-bike to assist them to get to the top of the hill, and then they come down faster. The average speed I ride my e-bike is about 6.5 miles an hour. I mean, that's just what it is. I think the fastest I've ever been, as the gentleman said, driving down the road is about 14, and that's down a highway. I'm not a speed junkie. I'm an older person who wants to get out and enjoy them. And I think they're a marvelous opportunity as long as they are pedal assist, they have pedals, and you have to ride them. And they're the only thing on the trail that can be limited in their speed. A horse can reach 56 miles an hour in a short distance. A mountain bike rider averages somewhere between 27 and 30 on their downhills, or 17 is average, but an e-bike can't go any faster than 20 that's regulated, except a class 3, and it's regulated at 28. Technology is also smart technology, so any of the bikes can be adjusted to meet the requirements that you would come up with. And I think that they're the future, and I think that change is hard for people to understand. And I used to be that way when I was younger, but I think change is usually for the better. And thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Mark. Okay, we've got Andrew Stevens next. Ken, if you are back or having troubles with your mic, please put it in the chat, as I do have you on the queue. But we'll go to Andrew Stevens, then Kyle, and then hopefully to Ken, and then Scott. So Andrew.
Hi there. My name's Andrew Stevenson. I ride mountain bikes, I ride gravel bikes, I ride road bikes, and I ride e-bikes. So I've ridden them all. And I'm really not going to get involved in categorizing one or the other, but I want to make an observation. I have for 16 years been intimately involved with a 3-foot wide natural tread trail, 26 miles, that runs through DNR lands. And I've been involved in promoting, maintaining, and observing that trail. And I just want to make the following observation. Over that 16 years, e-bikes have come, and we have seen more and more e-bikes. And now our trail is a very attractive trail for e-bikes. It was built with cycling in mind and is used heavily. Over the 16 years, what I've noticed is that we are continually losing our marginal users. We're continuing to have people who are hikers, who are equestrians, who are more vulnerable to speed problems, are low speed users. And the number of users that we have in those categories continue to drop. When you interview those people about why they're not using the trail anymore, why they're not out there anymore, the problem is that they're having a real serious problem with the speeds of the cycles. And I'm not pointing at e-bikes, I'm pointing at all the cycles. And there is a common perception, the common thing I hear from all of our disaffected users who leave our trail is we're getting past too fast, and it's because the e-bikes came on the scene. I'm not going to say whether that's right or wrong, but I think we need to keep in mind that the public perception is that e-bikes are contributing to driving equestrian users, hiker users, and others off our trails. That's not a good position to be in. That's not a good place to be. So with that said, I echo strongly the last 2 or 3 commenters who say one size fits all is a real bad answer. What works on logging roads, what works on gravel surfaces, what works on trails in more open country in the east does not work on trails tight in the west. We need to find a way to differentiate amongst all the various opportunities on DNR so that we don't end up forcing so many people off of trails that they love because they're getting run out of town. Thank you. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Andrew. And thank you those in the chat putting your comments in there. Once again, those are being captured. So we've got Kyle McFarley next, and then Scott, and then Ken Ringer. And I'll say we have about 15 minutes left before we go back to the main room. So if you'd like to raise your hand, now's a good time. And if not, keep comments coming in the chat. So Andrew Andrew, you just went. Kyle McFarley, to you.
Hi, my name is Kyle McFarley. I'm zooming in from Walla Walla, Washington today. I do trail work in both Washington and Oregon with a group called the Blues Crew under the Blue Mountain Land Trust. Getting a call, let me send this to voicemail. So I ride a class 1 pedal assist electric mountain bike. I've been a bike enthusiast my entire life. And I made this choice because I went out and rode with a friend in Colorado and realized, wow, this is amazing what I can do. I'm so busy with all the things that I keep up with. I can't be the distance cyclist that I once was. And so I now use this pedal assist hardtail for commuting around town. I find that it helps out with parking density issues, both in downtown. I live across from Pioneer Park. I see a lot of people cycling to play pickleball, to play on the play equipment. It really solves a lot of our parking issues. I do use it on trails, and I use a bell. I used hand signals. I'm kind of a nerd. I wear my helmet. I grew up with polite behaviors. I do know that some users they're of a different generation. They didn't learn to be polite around people. I know that on narrower bike trails, I was recently in Bend. When things are dense, you got to slow down. And I think that identifying density areas and putting in rules and regulations for the density areas is important. I think that some areas are not dense, and in those non-dense areas, we don't need to be as concerned, and we don't need to have rules and regulations regarding that. Green Lake, for example, are e-bikes appropriate there? I don't know. It's the last time I was at Green Lake in Seattle. I mean, it was a zoo. Is that totally different from the Blue Mountains in Eastern Washington? Absolutely, yes. Are all the gravel roads now accessible to me and for others? I have a big concern for the baby boomer generation, and I see them being out and active, and I know that these pedal assist bikes are game changers. I'm 48 and I had knee surgery. I get sciatica. I have to do sciatica stretches. Like, I ride my bike all the time. It helps me get out. I tow my 6-year-old son with his mountain bike with a little bungee that I made. It's great. Has anybody ever been caught in my bungee? No. Is it worse than dogs? No. I think the dog problem on our trails is far worse than anything that we're dealing with electric bicycles. In terms of the threats facing Washington State, public trails, roads, things like this, there are greater issues with the Jeep people, with the dogs, with the off-leash dogs, with the aggressive dogs, with the people. Everybody seems to have an anxiety disorder this day, especially after COVID. And so their perception of the risk that they're facing when a cyclist comes by might be a little exacerbated right now. And I do know that slowing down around people, being cautious, not knowing what struggles they're dealing with is in taste. But this is my 2 cents. I see it a lot. I work on trails. I don't think that we're damaging the trails with pedal assist bikes. The Chiron type motorcycle e-bikes, those are a different kettle of fish. And I've seen them on sidewalks. I see them racing around in the park, in different parks. Those are something else. And I think that needs to be legislated through Washington Department of Licensing, and they need to have a motorcycle endorsement for those. Those will go 40 miles an hour.
Thanks, Kyle. I do want to we got about 10 minutes left. I want to give Ken Ringer an opportunity, as we haven't heard from you yet. And then we can go to Scott again. But Ken, is your audio working? I'll give you another 10 seconds. We're not able to hear you. I'll type it in the chat. Okay, well, hopefully before we go to the main group, you can get your audio figured out. I don't see anybody's hand that is new, so Scott, we'll go back to you.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, there's a whole gamut of things that I hadn't thought of, Green Lake or whatnot, but I personally, I'm thinking of Capitol Forest out of Fall Creek, Tiger Mountain, Raging, places like that are mostly e-bikes, or mostly mountain bikers, I should say. And I've been doing this since the mid 80s. And every time there's a change to a mountain bike, be it suspension, front suspension, rear suspension, disc brakes, we've gotten faster because we can. The bikes have gotten lighter. We can go faster up and down. And there's always a safety issue with mountain biking. And you don't go to Predator on Tiger Mountain if you're not a pretty good mountain biker. And if somebody's coming by fast, you shouldn't be surprised. But I just think that e-bikes are the future. They don't tear up the trail any more than any other bikes. I don't think most e-bikers, not that there's many out there that I've seen, I see a few on Strava, but I rarely run into them. But again, I have an ADA placard, but I just don't see the reason why we would cut out more people that can help us when we want to, push for less logging or more trails, people that can help make trails. I think I'll go back to the snowboard analogy. I think it's a lot of old timers that are they don't like the new technology, the new changes, even though they've all gone to full suspension, lightweight, carbon fiber, you name it. And like many people have said, just try one. If you have any questions, just try it, because even if I didn't have this disability and I tried one, I would buy one because they're so much funner. And it's all about having fun, getting out in the outside and just having a good time.
Thank you. I might have seen another hand go up. There's many of you that left your hands up, so I'm going through, and I think you can come off mute and let me know if you have re-raised your hand, as we've got a couple minutes left.
I have re-raised my hand if it's possible. Are you there?
Great. I think I saw Daniel also go off mute, so if you could keep it to a minute, that would be wonderful.
I will. The one thing I forgot that's very important is our state agencies do influence private landowners in the state also, and a lot of the private lands you have to buy permits on that are closed logging roads that don't allow motorized. Since they call these motorized in their WACs for DNR and WDFW, and don't use the RCW, which considers the class 1, 2, and 3 to be also considered as non-motorized, these private landowners don't allow them. And it's basically because when you talk to them, they say, well, the state doesn't approve them, then we're not, because they're influenced by DNR and WDFW. So how we manage this also will influence private lands that we would like to be able to access and could. So just want to make sure that point was made. Thank you.
Thank you. Daniel?
Yeah, I had a question. I guess it's more for the land managers themselves. I think it's an indisputable fact that that assisted bicycles allow access to a broad group of users, and I think that the question that the land managers have to ask is what are the what's the threshold where we're considering things in addition to access. If access is the ultimate goal, then we'd be working on making access to every trail for every type of user that exists. And if we think about what the thresholds are that land managers are willing to flex and stretch and adjust on in order to continue to keep their land relevant to the recreation community, as we so appreciate from DNR. I think those are going to be good questions to answer as they look at potentially expanding the user group. Because it is an undeniable fact that they increase access. That's not what people are disputing, I think. I think the question is what are the risks with that access, and are those risks worth it from the land manager perspective?
Thank you. We've got about 3.5 to 4 minutes left, so interesting amount of time. Appreciate all the comments in the chat again, and once we go back to the main session, we'll reshare WDFW and DNR's email, so if you have additional questions that you want to send directly to them, you are able to do so. And we also have a survey out, which asks similar question, but goes a bit into more detail. So we do, if you haven't already, we'll send those links out in the main session as well. You can complete that survey.
This is Scott. Can I have another comment?
Yeah, maybe I'll, does anyone who hasn't spoken have a final thought? And then definitely give you the mic, Scott, but maybe I'll wait 15 seconds.
Sure, I have an hour of speech I could give. But...
Okay, doing my counting. All right, Scott, mic's to you, virtual mic.
Okay, yeah, I just want to say I agree there's risk. And how far could we take that? Could we have somebody at every trailhead making sure that you have enough water, you have the proper hiking gear, you have a way to contact civilization if you get injured? When you're on trails out in the wilderness, there is a risk, be it from wildlife, other hikers, bikers, whatever. And it's just a risk that most of us are willing to take on to do what we enjoy doing. Nobody wants to go out there and scare people because they're going too fast. But, you know, mountain biking for a lot of us is a high speed, adrenaline fueled thing. I think Strava, if we want to really make things safe, let's get rid of Strava because people are always trying to be king of the mountain and whatever. I just think that a pedal bike with a motor assist, I weigh 170, my bike's 48. I'm doing a lot less damage than a guy that's 190, you know, with a 30-pound bike that doesn't know how to ride and he's scratching on the brakes more often. We just have to allow as many people as we can to get out and enjoy DNR lands. And I think the more and more mountain bikes are the biggest selling part of the biking industry right now. So I think we need to come up with a way to use them and make it safe for everybody and get more people out to enjoy the wilderness.
Thank you. And I see, Ken, you were able to type in the chat. I'm glad. I'm sorry the audio isn't working for you today. And all right, you all should have received a pop-up. The breakout rooms will naturally close in about 50 seconds. So you'll get transported. You don't have to click anything to do so, but you can also click leave breakout room and it'll take you to the main session. Appreciate all the feedback.
Thank you.
Everybody, we're going to just take a moment to let people get settled again in the main group, and I'll ask Claire to bring the slide deck back up. So we'll just give folks a moment to get settled, and we'll be get started in just a moment again. Okay. We can go to the next slide, Claire. So just for wrap up, we're going to cover a few things. I think we'll start with a report out actually from the various breakout groups. So actually, Claire, I gave you incorrect instructions. I think we can go back to the mural if you have a moment. And we're going to just do a quick report out from each of the 4 facilitators. And I'll go first, and then we'll go to Claire and Lucila. So there are lots of great comments provided in this group, and there are a lot of comments that were put in the chat and a few questions. We're going to review those comments in the chat after this meeting and make sure that we record those as well, but we weren't able to get them all on the screen. So I'll just note that there was a lot of interest in our group. I don't think it was exclusively with everyone, but there was a lot of interest in allowing e-bikes somewhere on public lands. Many folks highlighted the importance or highlighted including class 1 e-bikes on non-motorized trails. Some indicated that e-bikes should have a place to ride, but not on the non-motorized trails, but closed roads, or having e-bike, mountain bike specific trails is important. And then where there was more questions amongst the group that Annalise and I were with was really about if class 2 and 3 should be allowed on trails or closed roads. Some expressed concern about the throttle and the experience of how that changes the experience on the landscape, or where's the difference between an e-bike with a throttle and a motorcycle. So some had concerns about class 2. Others indicated that class 2 might be appropriate because it's still only going 20 miles an hour, and that would be speed would be the bigger concern. And so class 1 and 2 could be considered. And then others highlighted class 1 and 3 because of the concern of the throttle, whereas some were concerned about the speed at which class 3 e-bikes could travel up to 28 miles an hour. And then one, I'm just looking at it here, the bottom right, is some noted that for non-motorized single track trails, going 28 miles an hour is probably not a concern, is what we heard. And that's more of a concern on roads or straight routes where you could actually go that fast. There were lots of opportunities, challenges, concerns, and considerations, and I can't highlight them all or do them justice. But a few that I'll note is safety, of course, was a concern with regard to e-bike use, as well as speed, and those are related. Some others that were brought up was noting that there are industrial regulations about use of chainsaws and other equipment, including electric chainsaws during high fire danger. And there was a question that was asked is, would e-bikes be affected or could they affect fire danger? There are some notes about research that's being done elsewhere, pilot programs, and I think I'll leave it at that. Annalise, would you like to add anything from our group?
No, I think we heard a number of times just about multi-use trails and safety concerns around particularly horseback riders. I think there are a number of folks who are part of horseback riding communities or have shared trails with horses before. So we heard that a few times as well.
Thank you. Claire, we can go to your group next.
Thanks, Thomas. I'll scroll over. So some highlights from our group. The importance of education and user etiquette was a topic amongst our participants. We had some folks say that e-bikes allow them to keep up with their friends, especially if they have disabilities or accessibility issues. We had some folks say only on motorized trails because of trail wear, although we did have a couple of people share different studies and reports about the impacts of e-bikes versus analog bikes or normal mountain bikes on trail use. A couple people voiced interest in having clear and reasonable expectations to eliminate or reduce problems between user groups. And we also had that e-bike should be allowed under all circumstances. We had a lot of support for Class 1 e-bikes on all types of trails where bikes are currently allowed, and some concerns about Class 2 and Class 3. We did also have some support that people should be able to use any of the e-bikes on whichever trails bikes are currently allowed, if that is their choice of whichever class they choose. And we had a good discussion about how important they are for accessibility, that it is ableist to not allow e-bikes. We also had some concerns about controlling access and enforcement of the use of e-bikes. Some discussions about the harms of stereotyping individual user groups based on individual behavior, and interest in the environmental impacts of e-bikes on trails. And also some concerns about different user groups as well as horseback riders. So just interaction between different kinds of recreationalists as well as safety and speed. But we had users from all different types of recreation groups represented. So Cheryl, anything to add?
Find my mute button and maybe my camera button too. That seems like the most of it. We did have, if you slide over to the right a little bit, we had a little bit of a conversation about opportunities for education. We talked about guidance at the trail access points that help different user groups know what the expectations on the trail are. We also talked about having information available to people at the point of purchase of bicycles so they can choose the right bike class that know what trails they'd be able to use and which ones they wouldn't when they choose to purchase their bike. And that might help having people choose a bike that's appropriate for the uses that they want to have.
Thanks.
Thank you, Cheryl.
Cheryl, can we go to Lucila? And then I want to make sure we get to Alyssa's group as well, just within the time we have. So thank you both.
Great. I'll try to be brief. A lot of the folks in my room echoed some of the things that were said in Thomas and Claire's group. So I'll highlight that a thread throughout a lot of the commenters was just the benefits and how e-bikes expand access to aging populations and folks with disabilities. So that was a common thread. There was an importance of respect and respect on trails and trail etiquette. some highlights that signs are a useful tool for that. We went into the discussion of which of the 3 classes, and there was somewhat support for all classes, especially on the closed roads, yet with non-motorized trails, there was a bit more discussion there. And speed was a concern. Trail disruption was a concern, yet there was differing opinions there of some folks saying that e-bikes actually don't damage trails as much as folks think. And that for speeds as well, similar to in your room, Thomas, that the amount of times folks get up to 28 miles per hour is rare out on the mountain. I'll also note that, you know, there's some confusion around the classifications of the e-bikes. So suggestions for making those descriptions simpler. So tying it to that education piece. Some other concerns were around enforcement and comments on communities being able and having being empowered to regulate, and kind of that coming back to that trail etiquette, and kind of closed off the conversation going back to the values. If access is one of the main values for DNR and WDFW, how do we keep that in mind with other values that are important to people?
Thanks, Lucila. Should we go to Alyssa, your group?
And in the interest of time, I'll be quick here. Our group, this is group 4, echoed a lot of the same concerns and same points as groups 1, 2, and 3. But in some, there were a lot of folks that mentioned that class 1 bikes should be allowable where mountain bikes are allowable. Class 3, generally that they should not be allowable. However, there are multiple opinions on the allowability of class 2 e-bikes. There was one mention that folks that tend to get class 2 e-bikes may be occasionally less experienced than folks that are riding class 1 and class 3 e-bikes, which brought us to an overarching theme of etiquette and behavior of individuals riding e-bikes on these trails. Communications between different user groups, so alerting one another on trails, on blind curves, when coming up behind. And that also links to increasing information dissemination amongst e-bike riders and different users of these trails generally. Clarification on definitions, so clarification on the function of the throttle, what, you know, maybe some people see that there is a throttle function on certain types of e-bikes, and what does that actually mean for the trail experience? What does motorized versus non-motorized actually mean in practice? And then how to accommodate multiple uses on these trails. There was mention that wider trails increase visibility, which is good for accommodating multiple uses. And then lastly, just considerations for users with ADA needs, but then also those individuals who maybe don't qualify for an ADA placard, but maybe less able to be able to still use those roads with e-bikes as needed. Let's see, Lauren, is there anything that you'd like to highlight that I may have missed here?
No, I think you covered it. Thanks, Alyssa.
Great.
Thank you all for providing this information and the dialogue and input today. Claire, if we could go back to the slides, I'm just going to cover a few next steps. One, if you go to the next slide, there's another public town hall just like this one scheduled for 5:30 p.m. next Wednesday. We can go to the next slide. In an effort to try and make the town halls as accessible to as many as possible, that's at town hall after work hours. So tell your friends or come back and join for more. Also, in response to a question that I saw in the chat, there will be a summary report from that mural whiteboard. So we're going to clean it up a little bit and we're going to post that online after the agencies have reviewed for public review and for your information to ensure this process is transparent. Also, the recording of this meeting, including the recordings of all 4 breakout groups, will be posted online. And more information about e-bikes as well as the public process is also available on DNR and DFW's website. And my colleague Lucila will post a link to those websites shortly. Next slide, please. Again, I want to highlight, we also have this public survey. There's a Spanish and English version on the DNR and DFW website. So please feel free to share this survey with your friends, with your colleagues, with your recreation partners. We want to try and get as much input as possible. And if you haven't filled it out, please do so. It is open until July 15th. And the link I can see is in the chat to both the Spanish and English survey. And then again, if you have comments or questions that we didn't get to today, please feel free to email those to either wildthings@dfw.wa.gov or recreation@dnr.wa.gov, and we'll put those in the chat as well for follow-up, including, we'll include the Triangle team's emails as well if you have questions about other opportunities to engage in this process. So lastly, just really want to thank you for participating today, for the input. And the last thing we'll just ask you to do, if you can, is fill out just a quick poll sharing with you how satisfied you are with this meeting today, and that will help us adjust for the future. So thank you for being here. I'll ask Claire to launch that poll in just a moment, and you're free to go once you're done filling out that poll, so thank you. We'll see the poll in just a moment. So go ahead and start filling out the poll. Very satisfied, neutral, somewhat. And again, the emails for Claire and I are in the chat, as well as the emails for the agencies. So please go ahead and write those down. We're glad to hear that many of you are satisfied. If you were somewhat unsatisfied, please let us know so that we can make improvements for the future. So thank you all for being here today and for your input and for your kind and cordial tone today. Hope you have a great afternoon. Bye now.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thomas, I'm going to go ahead and end the meeting. Is that okay?
Can we just stay on for those from the Triangle team and DNR team? Can we just stay on for a moment and we'll have everyone else leave?
Let's end the recording.
I do have to hop off. So
yep.
Good job, everyone. I will see you all later. And
could you make me
Thomas, you are the host.
Perfect.
Yeah.